September 27, 1986. A desolate stretch of the E4 highway near Ljungby, Sweden. It was a biting, frost-nipped morning in Scandinavia. On the side of the road, a massive, mangled tour bus lay on its side, a jagged scar of metal against the Swedish horizon. Shivering in the dawn light, three young men stood in the grass, their faces a mask of shock, disbelief, and burgeoning grief. They were the rising kings of heavy metal, but in that moment, they were just terrified kids far from home. Among them stood James Hetfield, barefoot and screaming into the empty air. A few feet away, beneath the weight of the steel beast, lay the soul of their band. This was the end of the road for Cliff Burton, the major legend, and the visionary bassist of Metallica. To understand the weight of that silence on the Swedish highway, we must go back to the height of the storm. By the fall of 1986, Metallica wasn't just a band, they were a cultural phenomenon. They had just released Master of Puppets, a masterpiece that had rewritten the rules of thrash metal. They had survived the club circuits, the no life till leather days, and were now conquering European arenas alongside Anthrax. They were young, arrogant, and seemingly invincible. But at the center of this whirlwind was Cliff Burton, a man who preferred bell-bottoms to leather jackets and Bach to the top 40. He was the musical North Star of the group, the one who taught them about harmony, theory, and the beauty of a distorted bass solo. The tour was grueling, and the European leg was particularly taxing. Life on the road meant sleeping in cramped, uncomfortable tour bus bunks. The bunk fatigue had reached a breaking point by the time they left Stockholm. The members were irritable, fighting over the meager comforts of a moving vehicle. This brings us to the moment that would haunt Kirk Hammett for the rest of his life, the card game. On the evening of September 26, the band decided to let fate handle the seating arrangements. They were arguing over who got the better, more spacious bunk at the back of the bus. Cliff and Kirk Hammett decided to settle it with a deck of cards. The stakes were simple: the winner gets to choose their bed. Cliff reached into the deck and pulled out the ace of spades. He looked at Kirk with a smirk and said, "I want your bunk." Kirk, annoyed but fair, conceded. "Fine, take my bunk. I'll sleep in the front." It was a decision made in seconds that would last an eternity.
The first card that Cliff picked was the ace of spades, and he looked at me and said, "I want your bunk." And I said, "Fine, take my bunk, I'll sleep up front. That's probably better anyway, you know."
Cliff climbed into the bed right next to a large window. Kirk went to the front, unaware that he had just traded his life for a few more inches of legroom. The crash happened at approximately 7 a.m. As the bus sped toward Copenhagen, it suddenly began to fishtail. The driver claimed he hit a patch of black ice, that invisible, lethal coating that turns a road into a skating rink. The heavy vehicle skidded out of control, left the pavement, and began a violent roll. Inside, the world became a blender of shattered glass, twisting metal, and human bodies. Cliff Burton, sleeping soundly by the window, was thrown through the glass as the bus tipped. In a horrific twist of physics, the bus completed its roll and landed directly on top of him. The aftermath was a scene from a nightmare.
I heard a skidding, I heard a vibration, and then this motion. I thought we were going off a cliff.
James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Kirk Hammett crawled out of the wreckage, dazed but relatively unhurt. They began calling out for each other.
And I heard everyone screaming except for Cliff. And I thought, oh my God, something's wrong.
When they realized Cliff was missing, they saw his legs protruding from beneath the bus. Panic, raw and unfiltered, took over. The band and the crew attempted to use a small crane to lift the bus off their brother. For a fleeting second, there was hope. The bus began to rise. But then, the unthinkable happened. The cable snapped, or the crane slipped, reports vary, and the massive weight of the bus crashed down on Cliff a second time. James Hetfield, driven by a mix of rage and denial, began walking the road in his underwear and socks. He was looking for the black ice the driver had blamed. He walked miles back and forth, but he found nothing. The road was dry. The sun was up. The ice was a ghost.
What did you do? What did you do?
What happened? You know, what's going on? Is this guy drunk or la la la? Oh, we hit some black ice. And I recall in my underwear you know, and socks, walking for miles, looking for this black ice, walking back on. Where's this black ice? I don't see any black ice. And I wanted to kill this guy. I was gonna end him there.
To this day, the band remains skeptical of the official story. Was the driver asleep? Was he under the influence? No charges were ever filed, and the driver was never convicted of negligence. The loss of Cliff Burton was more than the loss of a bass player. Cliff was the professor. He was the one who encouraged James to explore melody and Lars to find better rhythms. He was the soul that bridged the gap between the aggression of punk and the complexity of classical music. When the news reached the fans, the metal world went into mourning. The major legend was gone at just 24 years old. This is where the story shifts from tragedy to a different kind of mystery. Much like the missing notebook of Bon Scott, fans have long debated Cliff's final musical contributions. At the time of his death, the band was already thinking about their next move. When they eventually released And Justice for All, the album was famously criticized for its lack of audible bass. Some say it was a grief-stricken reaction by Lars and James, a way to erase the presence of anyone who wasn't Cliff. However, Cliff's spirit lived on in the track, To Live Is to Die, which featured a poem and musical riffs he had written before the accident. The family of Cliff Burton, particularly his father Ray Burton, became a pillar of the Metallica community until his own passing. They used Cliff's royalty checks to fund scholarships for young musicians, ensuring that his love for theory and education continued. But the question remains, what would Metallica have become if the Ace of Spades had stayed in the deck? Would they have stayed on the path of progressive thrash, or would the Black Album era have looked entirely different under Cliff's guidance? Back on that Swedish road, the site of the crash has become a place of pilgrimage. A memorial stone stands there today, engraved with the lyrics from Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, bass solo, Take One. The band almost called it quits. They returned to San Francisco, broken and aimless. They drank to numb the pain, a period James refers to as their alcoholica phase. But they remembered Cliff's own drive, his no bullshit attitude. They knew he would have hated for the music to stop. They found Jason Newsted, a man who had the impossible task of filling a giant's shoes, and they kept going. The first time they played without him, the hole on stage was a canyon. But every time James yells the lyrics to Master of Puppets or Kirk plays the solo to Fade to Black, they are playing for the man who won a bunk and lost his life in the cold Swedish air. Cliff Burton lived for the music, and he died at the peak of his powers. On quiet nights, if you listen to the isolated bass tracks of those early albums, you can still hear him, the fuzzy, distorted, melodic roar of a man who took the highway to greatness and became a god before he ever had a chance to grow old. If you enjoyed the video, comment below, Cliff Burton lives too, and leave a like to help this poor rocker grow his channel.